All right, so this is gonna get some blood pressures up. Certainly is getting mine up. So, welcome to my video on Republicans just out and out admitting that they think that pregnancy is a punishment to a woman rather than what it should be, which is a loving experience filled with excitement because you're going to become a parent or you're helping your friends with surrogacy or whatever your motivation for bearing a child. But apparently, the Republican Party, specifically the presidential candidates, they're showing their true colors and saying that they don't agree and they don't think that their base agrees. I'm sure there are plenty of Republicans who don't agree with this stance. Unfortunately, the toxic parts of the Republican Party have completely taken over, and so those voices are just being drowned out. But anyway, to the article, which is me so pissed off. Granted, it does not surprise me, it's just disappointing. But anyway, Pence would ban abortions when pregnancies aren't viable. His GOP rivals won't say if they agree. Now, this is why I'm saying that these Republicans view pregnancy as a punishment and not as what it should be. Because if their whole shtick, if their whole reason for being against abortions is because every child should have a chance at life, yada, 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 then why not ban abortions? Why ban abortions for pregnancies that aren't viable? Do you not know what viable means? This fetus is not going to have a chance at life. That's why they are not viable. Why are you, wanting to ban abortions in this case? That should be the slam dunk. That's the one that nobody should have a problem with. Because let's face it, women in these situations, they're not exactly skipping to the doctor, excited that they can finally have an abortion. This is devastating. These are women who want to have a child and find out that they would just be putting that child through a few minutes or maybe a few hours worth of suffering before they finally die. How is this doing any how is this beneficial to anybody? It's not. But anyway, let's get into the article. In a Republican presidential field full of candidates opposed to abortion rights, Mike Pence stands out in his embrace of the cause. The former vice president, who is seeking the White House in 2024, is the only major candidate who supports a federal ban on abortion at 6 weeks, before many women know they're pregnant. He has advocated pulling from the market a widely used abortion pill that has a better safety record than penicillin and Viagra. And he's implored his Republican rivals to back a 15-week federal ban as a minimum national standard, which several have not done. In a recent interview, Pence went even further, saying abortions should be banned when a pregnancy isn't viable. Such a standard would force women to carry pregnancies to term, even when doctors have determined there is no chance a baby will survive outside the womb. Which is why I'm saying that this is just simply Pence saying that pregnancy is nothing more than a punishment. Because why do that? Seriously. I mean, what benefit is anybody getting from this? Literally nobody. I don't know. is Pence a parent? Is he just bitter that he's not a parent and so he's going to force others to suffer? Or because I don't know if he's a parent, and if he is, I feel sorry for his kids. I really do. I'm pro-life. Really? Then why are you forcing a child to be born only for it to die immediately after? What is pro-life about that? I don't apologize for it. That's fine, you're still an idiot, Pence said in the interview. I just heard so many stories over the years of courageous women and families who were told that their unborn child would not go to term or would not survive, and they had a healthy pregnancy and a healthy delivery. And then everybody at Starbucks clapped. Doctors disputed Pence's characterization, saying there are conditions that are always incompatible with life and others where the chance of survival is so slim that most patients were previously given the choice concluded that continuing the pregnancy wasn't worth the suffering, grief, or risk. Pence, however, says he's undeterred. Of course he is. And that's just it. If there's a slim chance, then there is a chance. And if those pregnancies go to term and it turns out that the baby is healthy, that's great. If you want to take that chance, great. But if there's absolutely zero chance, why do that to a parent? I just do not see how this is pro-life. Pro-birth, absolutely. But pro-forced birth. But pro-life? I just am not seeing that. I want to always err on the side of life, he said. I would hold that view in these matters because I honestly believe that we got this extraordinary opportunity in the country today to restore the sanctity of life to the center of American law. Really? Forcing a woman to give birth to what, if not now, will be a dead fetus. How is that being on the side of life exactly? I mean, my idea of life is also being healthy. And how are the parents going to be healthy when they have to endure the trauma? And I'm not just talking about the woman here. This is going to affect the father too, obviously in different ways. But it's going to affect the father too. Or the would-be father. How is this how does this not cause just trauma? I mean, I guess if you want to detour the couple from getting pregnant again because they don't want to go through that again. I mean, I guess if that's the goal, but I fail to see how this is preserving life. This is just ew. All right. And I just don't see how that's the sanctity of life, let alone at the center of American law. What does that even mean? You dipshits are generally pro-death penalty, which is the exact opposite of the sanctity of life. So, no. What you're spouting is a bunch of bullshit. Those comments place Pence firmly in the right of the rest of the 2024 presidential field and alone among GOP candidates, who largely declined to take a stance on the issue. And they drew alarms from obstetricians and doctors who specialize in high-risk pregnancies and say non-viable pregnancies are far more common than people realize. They range from ectopic pregnancies, when an embryo implants somewhere other than the uterus, to deadly birth defects and other severe pregnancy complications. Okay, let's go sentence by sentence on that. First off, I'm glad that the rest of the presidential field hasn't agreed with him, but the fact that they haven't disagreed isn't actually better. I mean, by not taking a stance on the issue, they're basically saying that they are either they agree with Pence, or they're so afraid of losing what minuscule amount of support they have from the Republican Party, from the Republican voters, that they're not going to chance actually, saying how morally bankrupt this position happens to be. So, I'm not going to exactly give them a cookie for this. It's still horrible. Now, obviously that doctors and obstetricians, which, why does it say obstetricians and doctors? Obstetricians are doctors. Ugh, that's a horrible sentence. But, yeah, exactly. People do not understand that pregnancies are hard. This is not just a walk in the park, and that's if pregnancies go well. So I can believe that a lot of pregnancies do end up being high risk. Now, ectopic pregnancies. I have heard Republicans, again, in Congress, high-ranking Republicans, not everyday people, that claim that ectopic pregnancies, you can just go in there and move the egg to where it should go. As if that's ever been a thing. I do not know where this person went to school, but they all should have their education licenses or whatever taken away for allowing someone to ever think that. Because that is not how ectopic pregnancies work. I just do not know where anybody could get the idea that that's how you deal with ectopic pregnancies, because it's not. And if it was, don't you think that doctors would do the damn thing? No, they don't, because that's not a thing. All right, to deadly birth defects and other severe pregnancy complications. Okay. Banning abortions in these cases, doctors say, lead to outcomes that are both cruel and put women's lives and mental health at risk. And I would argue, since these schmucks don't seem to give a rat's ass about women, physical or definitely not their mental health, because apparently in their eyes all women are walking incubators, I would say that it would also impact the man's mental health, the would-be father. First off, because they probably, would have a hard time dealing with watching their spouse, their wives, their significant others, whoever is delivering the baby, watching them suffer physically and mentally from this outcome. Or just the fact that, men have empathy, and if these men really wanted to become fathers, obviously this is devastating, and to have to go through watching a child be born only to know that they will die within a few minutes to a few hours, that's crushing for men too. I just do not see, again, I do not see how this is beneficial. Okay, so there are certain conditions that have a slim chance, and great. People who beat the odds. Wonderful. Why take that decision out of women's hands and their doctors by telling them that, oh yeah, you have this horrible birth defect that the baby will die within a few minutes of birth, but our hands are tied, we can't do anything, so sucks to be you. How is that going to do any good to anybody? Because there's a small percentage of births that might beat the odds and might turn into viable children. I do not see how this is a risk worth taking. And it certainly shouldn't be some dipshit who, will never know what it's like to be pregnant. And he gets to decide whether a woman gets to choose for herself what she wants to do. If she wants to have the baby, great. If she wants to risk it, great. That's on her. But to have someone who knows nothing about a situation and force them to give birth, I fail to see how this is good for anybody. Just to satisfy your ego? I've got to look it up. Because I'm questioning whether he and his wife ever actually had sex. I really, really do. Because, good Lord. What? Oh my God, he has children? And they're girls? Oh, those poor girls. How old are they? It doesn't say here. But, oh, I feel so sorry for them. I really, really do. Who was it? I read this quote that even if you have kids, you can still sound like an incel. Because, good Lord, Mike Pence totally sounds like one. What the hell? Alright, back to the article. One of the things that you cannot understate is the difficulty for a woman to carry a non-viable pregnancy, said Alan Peaceman, professor emeritus, oh my lord, of obstetrics and gynecology at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. It is psychological torture to go out in the world for people to see your pregnancy, and people will come up to you and want to talk about your pregnancy. I didn't even think about that one. And that puts the woman in a terrible position that nobody should be in unless they choose to be in that position. Exactly. It gets even worse than I thought. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that strangers will come up to you. Forget family members. Strangers will come up to you and ask you about the baby. And yeah, that's awkward. Oh yeah, it's the child is going to die within a few minutes of it being born, but it's illegal, so I have no other choice but to actually give birth. That's just ew. Once an issue largely hidden from public view, non-viable pregnancies have gained attention since the Supreme Court ended the constitutional right to an abortion last year, ushering in a wave of bans and restrictions in Republican-led states. Those moves have implications not only for unwanted pregnancies, but also for cases where women receive heartbreaking diagnoses, often when they're months along into pregnancies that were deeply desired. And that's the part that these Republicans do not get. Abortions are not for women who just think, oh, shit, I got pregnant. Oh, well, skip down to the doctor and have an abortion. That is not how this works. Women who get abortions generally wanted to be pregnant. Especially when we get to this point. They wanted to be pregnant. And to be told that you have to be pregnant, even though this bundle of joy that you were expecting is going to turn into a nightmare, that's just, talk about cruel and unusual punishment. This is why I say they view pregnancy as a punishment. These Republicans do not view pregnancy as a joyous occasion. They see it as a punishment, and if you just so happen to get through the punishment unscathed, oh well, good on you. I get a kid out of it. They don't give a shit about women. Not at all. In states like Texas, Florida, and Louisiana, women have described the anguish of being denied abortions, even when they know their babies will be stillborn or die shortly after birth. Some have had to wait until they develop life-threatening infections for intervention. Others have spent thousands of dollars to travel to states where the procedure is still allowed. That is just horrible. Women should not have to go through this just for the crime of being pregnant. And, the fetus not being viable. What crime did the woman do? Oh, that's right. She's a woman who happened to get pregnant, and obviously all those women are totally evil. So they deserve whatever punishment comes to them. Ugh. Sarah Prager, a professor of obstetrics and gynecology at the University of Washington Medical Center, said she and her colleagues have seen a steady stream of patients coming from states where abortions are now banned. About 11% of those patients, she said, have received a serious diagnosis, including cases where there's no chance of the fetus surviving. They are often absolutely shocked to learn that the abortion laws also prohibit them from being able to get the care to be safe, she said, even though they knew these laws were in place in the state. Which makes me wonder, how many women who voted for these Republicans and who were considered to be pro-life never in a million years dreamed that this is what pro-life meant. Because there are people who didn't realize the extent of what pro-life laws will do for women who just, in their reproductive care, like, say, miscarriages, or in this case, having non-viable pregnancies. And it never occurs to them because that's not their job to think of these things. Because it's not their job to tell doctors how to practice medicine. It's as if being a physician is a specialty, and so they're the ones who know better as to how to proceed in certain situations. What a shock. Spokespeople for former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, I'm going to throw up, declined to say whether they back Pence's position. Oh, I'm sure DeSantis does. Don't know about Trump. Trump, the early frontrunner, has repeatedly said he backs exceptions in cases of rape, incest, and the life of the mother, and has blamed hardline abortion stances for costing the party in last year's midterm elections. And who the hell... He claims that this is the problem, that hardline abortion stances. But who put the 3 Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court that had these hardline stances? Oh, that's right, Trump. So when it works for him, the idea that his base is pro-life, he's happy to point that out. But, oh, no, this is just too far. So suddenly, it's not his fault. Ugh. DeSantis, who is polling a distant second, signed a 6-week ban in Florida that includes an exception for fatal fetal abnormalities, along with rape, incest, and to save the mother's life. He has declined to say whether he supports a federal ban. Okay. Now, some might think that this is reasonable, but Since most women don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks, they wouldn't know if there's any abnormalities, let alone fatal. Rape victims, incest victims wouldn't know they're pregnant. And to save the mother's life, well, that wouldn't be till, further along in the pregnancy, much further than 6 weeks. So, I don't see. Does that mean that in these instances, screw the 6-week ban? Because otherwise, it literally makes no sense. All right. South Carolina's Senator Tim Scott's campaign pointed to an article that did not address the question of unviable pregnancies. Yeah, he's really good at that. A spokesman for former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley said only that she will sign pro-life legislation that includes exceptions for rape, incest, and for the life of the mother. What about the life of the fetus? Jesus Christ. Suggesting she too may be opposed to exception for non-viable pregnancies, but declined to clarify. So, yeah. Pence's push to end abortion puts him at odds with the majority of Americans who are broadly opposed to the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade reversal, which I might add includes Republicans. This is not a partisan issue. When they say most Americans oppose the reversal, oppose Dodd, that includes Republicans. So, no, it's no longer just a Democrat versus Republican issue. While most favor at least some restrictions, a majority of U.S. adults say abortion should be legal during the first weeks of pregnancy, even in states with the strictest limits, according to a new poll from the Associated Press Nork Center for Public Affairs Research. Okay, what do you mean by first weeks of pregnancy? I do not understand what you think that means. But Pence, an evangelical Christian for whom the issue is deeply personal, why, you've been pregnant before? Argues restricting abortion is more important than politics and calls it the cause of our time. More important than politics? I'm sorry. This is a medical procedure. This has shit all to do with politics. Get your nose out of women's uteruses. I don't think your nose has been in your wife's. All right. As he works to appeal to conservatives in states like Iowa, Pence also points to the issue as one that distinguishes him from his GOP rivals, contrasting himself with some people in this field now who want to regulate this issue to just a debate among the states. Pence does say he has always supported exceptions for rape, incest, and to save the life of the mother, though he told an Indiana anti-abortion group in 2010 that he believed abortion should never be legal, and later that it should only be legal to save the life of the mother. What a joy you are. There are a number of fetal conditions in which doctors generally agree there is truly zero probability of a healthy outcome, including anencephaly, a severe neural tube defect in which the skull doesn't form and the brain is exposed, said David Hackney, a spokesperson for the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine and a high-risk obstetrician in the Cleveland area. The chances of survival are absolute zero, no matter what Mike Pence says. He said, in such cases, he said, it feels absurd for people to be forced against their will to carry pregnancies to term. Absolutely. And let's just again say it. He's not a doctor. Mike Pence is not a doctor. He's not an obstetrician. He should have no say in what an obstetrician does. They either can provide medical care or they cannot. Politicians especially those without medical degrees, should not be telling obstetricians how to practice medicine. You don't know what the hell you are talking about. Pence said it's personal. How is it personal? You don't have a uterus. You've never been pregnant. Great. You watched your wife deliver a couple of kids. That is not personal. I'm sure if she had a non-viable pregnancy, your this is personal would change immediately. Because for some reason, so many Republicans are of the mindset that unless it happens to me, I do not give a shit. These people do not have empathy. But other cases are grayer. Take premature ruptures of membranes when the water breaks early, often in the second trimester, leaving a fetus without the amniotic fluid that protects it and supports the development of organs, including the lungs. In those cases, survival generally depends on how early the rupture has occurred. Oh wow, it's like there isn't a clear-cut answer, and that pregnancy complications are not a one-size-fits-all. That non-physicians can just point and make a blanket statement about. Who would have thunk? Hackney said with early membrane rupture, you do have rare survivors, but that exceedingly poor prognosis comes with a litany of risks, including hemorrhaging, blood loss, and dangerous infection, which can cause permanent infertility, shock, and sepsis as women wait to deliver or qualify for abortions under life of the mother exceptions. So, ironically, the very law that allows for life of the mother exceptions could very well be putting the life of the mother at risk. That makes so much sense. That's what happened to Savita Halappanavar, the 31-year-old woman who died in Ireland in 2012 of sepsis after she was denied an abortion, prompting the country to overturn its long-standing ban. How is it that it's only the U.S. that sees bad outcomes and, does something reasonable about it? Why is it that the U.S. doesn't do that? Ugh. Rachel Neal is a fellow with Physicians for Reproductive Health and an OB-GYN in Georgia, where abortion is outlawed after cardiac activity is detected around 6 weeks, while the state provides an exception in cases in which the physician determines in reasonable medical judgment that the pregnancy is medically futile. She said water breaking in the late second trimester would typically not be covered. That means women who previously had the choice to end their pregnancies early now either have to leave the state or wait to deliver a baby that will die immediately or shortly after birth, while putting themselves at high risk of infection that could impact their ability to get pregnant again. Like I said, this has got to be, pregnancy is a punishment, because why? Why would anybody want someone to go through with that? Makes no sense. It's completely uncharted territory, Neal said. Before all of this, almost nobody chose this. It was very uncommon that someone would choose to wait, because realistically, any outcome that would result in a live birth is so slim. 9 states with abortion restrictions explicitly exempt cases of lethal fetal anomalies, according to the Guttmacher Institute, a research group that supports abortion rights. Even in states with such exemptions, however, doctors say there can be confusion. Some states have developed lists for what qualifies as a fatal fetal condition, but doctors say they will never fully capture every potential diagnosis, and most states do not have such lists, leaving definitions up for interpretation. How lethal does it have to be? Peaceman asked. Does it have to die within the first few hours or the first 30 days? That is so grim and morbid. Ugh. And I have a morbid sense of humor. And ew. At the same time, doctors in some states risk felony convictions that can carry 5 or 10 years of mandatory prison time if others dispute their interpretations of what some complain are overly broad and confusing rules. Eric Schneidler, the executive director of the Pro-Life Action League, a nonprofit that advocates against abortions, accused politically motivated physicians of focusing on edge cases to maintain a broad abortion license, and in some cases, deliberately misunderstanding what the law says in order to create this narrative that we have to have complete abortion license or we'll have physicians caught in a quandary. I'm going to ask, where did you get your medical degree? Because I'm going to go on a limb and say you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. This isn't doctors being hysterical and crying about easy, clear-cut laws. It's the fact that you do not understand enough about medicine to know that this isn't clear-cut. And maybe you should shut the fuck up about it. Nevertheless, he said he thinks candidates should focus on the majority of abortions and not these kind of cases. I really want to see these candidates talk about where we are in broad areas of consensus, he said. I would encourage political candidates to espouse positions that are widely held. I don't want to get hung up on these very rare cases. Now, granted, in some interpretations, he's right. You should deal with the vast majority of abortions. But he seems to be under the impression the vast majority of abortions are women who are like waking up, a month into their pregnancy and deciding, I don't like being pregnant. I've decided that it's just not for me, so I'm going to go get an abortion. Which is not how any of this works. So his idea of let's concentrate on widely held beliefs, your widely held belief or your claim that it's a widely held belief is probably based on some bullshit myth that doesn't actually exist. Whereas doctors are actually concentrating on, reality. So when they complain about laws affecting certain cases that I don't care how rare they are, if these laws that are supposed to be widely held and broadly accepted affect these rare cases, then maybe there's something wrong with having a law. Because it's not up to you to decide what the vast majority of abortions look like. Because I'm going to go out on a limb and say you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And since you don't, maybe you should shut up and let the people who do know what they're talking about and who the vast majority, what the vast majority of women who get abortions are like, to, practice the medicine they're supposed to, because they're the experts, not some schmuck who is a professional pearl clutcher at the thought that abortions are happening and making up these fantastical ideas in their head as to why this happens as opposed to reality. By talking to women who've had abortions or considered having abortions or whatever it is, or who haven't had an abortion and wish they had because they went through a horrible ordeal. Anything is better than his only evidence being his ass. because I just do not know what he's talking about. Just because a position is widely held among Republicans doesn't mean it's actual reality. And I do not understand why these people do not understand that. Just because you think that the vast majority of abortions fall under a certain category, I'm sure it's the woman who's been pregnant for a month or two and decide, you know what, I don't like this. I'm just going to have an abortion. I've decided I do not want to be pregnant. Vast majority do not do that. It's either they find out they're pregnant and it's like, oh shit, I can't afford to have a kid, or it's the other extreme, which I might add that I've mentioned this before. This also affects miscarriages. You gotta get it out somehow. Well, not the fetus, but the rest of it. The lining. You have to get it out somehow. So, abortion bans affect that. So again, I would ask this dipshit, where's the hysteria? It sounds like it's you who do not know what's going on, rather than the doctors who are making shit up or talking about rare cases that don't happen. Because you don't have a medical license, you do not know what you're talking about, so yeah, kindly shut the fuck up. Well, with that, I'm going to end this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.